You do not fear a slow fighter. That had been the unwritten law of aerial warfare for decades. Speed, agility, climb rate, those were the currencies of survival. If your aircraft could outrun your enemy, you dictated the fight. If you were slow, you became a target. It was almost a joke among fighter pilots, a truth so accepted that no one questioned it anymore. And no one embraced this belief more fiercely than the Luftwaffe. Their pilots were raised on tales of lightning-fast Messerschmitts streaking across the sky, slicing through enemy formations before climbing away untouched. German doctrine revolved around the idea that superior speed and maneuverability were the beating heart of air dominance. Anything slower than a Bf-109 or FW-190 was simply prey. So when American pilots began flying a massive, lumbering brute called the P-47 Thunderbolt, the German fighter arm erupted in laughter. They mocked its size. They mocked its weight. They mocked its climb rate and its sluggish behavior near the deck. To them, it wasn't a fighter. It was an industrial appliance with wings. A joke, an anvil, something that would never survive real combat. But in 1944, the rules changed. And one quiet 19-year-old American pilot would be right there as the change began. Ray Wetmore arrived in the European theater, looking far too young to be entrusted with a fighter aircraft. He had a slim frame, a reserved manner, and dark eyes that seemed to absorb everything around him. He wasn't brash. He wasn't loud. He wasn't a stereotypical fighter jock. But he was something far more valuable. Calm, meticulous, and disciplined. He listened when others boasted. He studied when others relaxed. And he learned the Thunderbolt in a way few pilots ever did. He studied its thick skin, built from almost absurd amounts of armor plating. He studied its monstrous 18-cylinder radial engine, which seemed capable of thriving under punishment that would tear lesser engines apart. And he paid special attention to the one characteristic no one else seemed to appreciate: how the P-47 behaved in a dive. While other fighters stiffened up or risked catastrophic structural failure as the airspeed increased, the Thunderbolt simply grinned and asked for more. It could dive faster than anything else in the war. Its wings didn't flutter. Its frame didn't groan. It just went down like a meteor, gathering speed until the air seemed to shred around it. That was the secret, the hidden advantage, the thing the Luftwaffe never understood. But the real shift came when Allied command changed the P-47's mission profile. No longer were Thunderbolts restricted to high-altitude bomber escort. By early 1944, the skies above 20,000 feet were becoming safer as new P-51 units arrived. So the Thunderbolts were ordered somewhere far more dangerous. Down low, treetop level, right into the heart of German logistics networks. It was here, where the Luftwaffe barely patrolled in German columns moved with a false sense of security, that the P-47 would reveal what it truly was. Not a slow, clumsy brute, but a wrecking ball. In early spring, the European countryside looked deceptively peaceful. Morning fog clung to the hedgerows. Frost glazed the wings of waiting aircraft. Engines rumbled awake as ground crews swarmed over the Thunderbolts with fuel hoses, belts of .50 caliber rounds, and maintenance tools. Steel boots clanged on metal walkways as armorers shoved ammunition into the trays. Wetmore climbed into the cockpit, careful and methodical as always, checking each gauge, each switch, each instrument like a man examining a surgical tool before an operation. He knew what these missions required. At low altitude, there was no margin for error, no time to correct a mistake. If the engine coughed, you died. If a wingtip brushed a tree, you died. If a flak burst exploded a little too close, you died. This was flying on the edge of a knife. Wetmore would soon get his test. His target that morning was a German convoy moving west of Chartres. Intelligence suggested it was unusually large. Fuel trucks, troop carriers, motorcycles, and armored cars strung into a long metallic line. If they reached their destination, a German regiment would stay in the fight. If they didn't, That sector of the front might unravel completely. So Wetmore took off at dawn, the rising sun casting long shadows across the airfield. As he cleared the runway, he immediately dropped low, skimming over the countryside at barely a few dozen feet. His aircraft thundered over fields and barns, startling livestock, sending waves of frost rippling in his wake. Minutes later, he spotted the first sign of the convoy, a faint smear of exhaust smoke on the horizon, then glints of metal, then the long, unmistakable shape of vehicles stretched across the winding road. The Germans didn't panic at first. They saw a single aircraft in the distance and didn't recognize the threat. A few men pointed, a few shouted, but there was no urgency. No one dove for cover. No one ran. To them, the slow Thunderbolt was little more than a curiosity, until Wetmore pushed the throttle forward. The engine roared. The air around the cockpit began to howl. He dropped lower still, the ground racing beneath him as the convoy rushed up to meet him. 900 feet, 700, 500, 300. The moment stretched out like the world was holding its breath. Wetmore squeezed the trigger. 8 Browner machine guns ignited with a thunderous blast. The sound was physical, something you felt in your ribs. Rows of muzzle flashes lit the wings as streaks of fire tore through the sky. The first fuel truck erupted. A sphere of flame swallowed the cab. Fire rolled across the road, engulfing 2 more vehicles. Men leapt from doors, running, stumbling, shouting. Wetmore tore past the explosion, feeling the heat slap the underside of his aircraft. He pulled up just enough to prepare for another run. The convoy was in motion now, vehicles swerving. Some tried to reverse, commanders yelling frantic orders no one could hear over the chaos. He banked left and came down again. 1,200 yards. 1,000. 800. This time, he aimed for a half-track. His round smashed into it, shredding the armor plating like wet cardboard. The vehicle burst into flames as soldiers threw themselves on the ground, rolling, crawling, fleeing any direction that wasn't toward the sky. Wetmore roared past again, but the Germans finally reacted. A flak gun near the convoy's center swung upward. Its crew worked in a fury, one man loading, one sighting, one screaming orders. The gun fired, sending black puffs of smoke bursting dangerously close. Dust hit his canopy. Shrapnel pinged against the fuselage. He did not pull up. 700 yards. 500. 400. 300. At this distance, he could see the flak crew's faces. He could see their fear. He could see their desperation. He pulled the trigger. A stream of rounds slashed across the gun, flipping men backward as the shield disintegrated. The weapon toppled to the side, rolling off the embankment like a kicked toy. Wetmore tore past a line of smoke, but didn't stop. He circled again and again. Trucks burned. Horns blared. Engines died. Tires exploded. Fire crackled across the road as smoke rolled upward in thick, choking waves. The Germans tried to flee in smaller groups now. Motorcycles darted between wrecks. Officers fled on foot. A few surviving trucks broke from the main column, trying to escape north. Wetmore saw them. His fuel was low, his ammunition nearly gone, but he committed to one final run. He aimed carefully and unleashed his last burst. His round smashed into the lead truck, sending it skidding sideways. It jackknifed it across the road. Everything behind it plowed into the wreck, creating a tangle of metal that blocked the escape route. The convoy could run no farther. Not from him. The mission was complete, and it had taken less than 20 minutes. This was the moment German pilots stopped laughing. This was the moment they realized the Thunderbolt wasn't slow. It wasn't clumsy. It wasn't a joke. It was a problem. If you enjoy hearing stories like this, forgotten missions, hidden heroes, and overlooked turning points, we'd be honored if you hit that subscribe button. These stories matter, and by subscribing, you help ensure they aren't lost. The German command soon felt the consequences of missions like Wetmore's. At first, they assumed these attacks were isolated incidents. But as the weeks passed, patterns emerged. Convoy after convoy was being destroyed. Fuel shortages intensified. Ammunition deliveries vanished. Entire regiments began arriving late to battle, or not at all. Panzer stalled in open fields, their tanks sitting idle as commanders screamed for fuel that would never arrive. Infantry units missed scheduled offensives. Retreating formations were pinned down because their escape routes were already burning wreckage. Eventually, the German High Command issued emergency orders. All convoys must move at night. All roads must be camouflaged. No vehicle could stop anywhere in open terrain. Drivers were warned not to halt for rest, repairs, or even wounded comrades, because the moment they paused, the Thunderbolts found them. Fear changed their doctrine, and that fear kept growing. Thunderbolts began hunting not just trucks and tanks, but locomotives, ammunition trains, fuel depots, and radio outposts. Bridges were blown. Rail lines were torn apart. Communication routes vanished. The P-47 became a symbol of relentless Allied pressure, one that the Germans increasingly referred to as a terror of the low sky. Ray Wetmore continued flying these missions with the same calm intensity he'd always shown. He became one of America's most successful aces, but he never boasted, never bragged. He carried the memory of fallen pilots with him. Men his age, younger even, who never returned from these brutal low-level attacks. Names like Lieutenant Robert Brown, Captain Walter Cook, Sergeant Harold Combs. Men who gave everything in the shadow of hedgerows and burning convoys. Wetmore survived the war. He returned home. He built a life. But the legacy of his missions, those terrifying dives, that relentless courage, and the day he made the Luftwaffe swallow their laughter, lives on, and it matters now more than ever. If this story moved you, please hit that like button. It tells the algorithm that this piece of history is worth remembering. We're dedicated to rescuing forgotten stories from the archives. If you want to join us on this mission, please subscribe and turn on notifications. Tell us where you're watching from, and share if someone in your family served. Thank you for ensuring that Ray Wetmore and the men of the 359th Fighter Group do not disappear into silence. They deserve to be remembered.